Climate change in the Philippines. How does climate change affect the country? How vulnerable is the Philippines from the effects of climate change? What contributes to this vulnerability? The Philippines is a tropical country located near the western Pacific Ocean, which has generally warm waters that resulted from the processing of absorbing heat from the sun, which the ocean transfers it to the atmosphere to create rain clouds and wind. Due to the increase in the ocean's temperature brought by climate change, heavy winds and storms are formed that may sometimes wreak havoc to countries like the Philippines, as observed from the past typhoons that devastated the country, like Typhoon Yolanda, which took the lives of thousands of people and destroyed infrastructures that affected their daily lives. The Philippines is also at risk of being underwater because of the rising sea level. In the Philippines, the sea level rise is 3 times higher than the global average due to the ocean current and wind, which may result to multiple islands to be completely submerged underwater if the sea level continues to rise rapidly. Climate change affects our country, and the Philippines is very vulnerable when it comes to the effect of it, simply because of our infrastructures present being particularly unsafe with extreme weather conditions, and how citizens in the country are not disciplined enough to properly throw their trash. According to an article written by Pia Ranada, scientists say that the reason why the average global temperatures are increasing is because of human activities, which we are responsible for. Another example is that global greenhouse gases, which emit fossil fuel industry to give us electricity and fuels, the effect of this is that it traps the heat in the Earth's atmosphere and it leads to warming of the entire planet. There are 6 ways on how climate change will affect the Philippines. First being more intense El Nidos, which is when the surface waters in the southern Pacific becomes warm. Second is the sea surface temperatures to rise, and it is expected for it to rise by 1 to 4 degrees Celsius. Third is ocean acidification, where the levels of our oceans can lead to the widespread of coral reef death. Fourth is sea levels to rise by 4 to 6 meters, and this is because of the melting ice sheets in the northern portions of the globe. Fifth is the tropical cyclones to intensify, where tropical cyclones will be recorded in certain areas that have never experienced it. Sixth is the rainfall, river flow, and flooding to intensify, where the monsoon rainfall will reach high loss, and more rainfall will lead to flooding, and it can also lead to landslides in upland communities. How many Filipinos in general believe and do not believe in the anthropogenic nature of climate change? Filipinos have their own opinions regarding the definition of climate change, but have a lack of knowledge in terms of the gravity of the issue or how to fix and solve it. The problem with climate change in the Philippines is the proper dissemination of information in local villages, communities, and cities. According to a study conducted by Pew Research Center survey in 2015, 72% of Filipinos claim to be concerned about climate change. Aside from this, the Philippines is one of the top 10 countries most worried about climate change, coming in 6th place. President Duterte also expressed his concern over the disruptive weather in the country, calling for collective action on climate change and ensuring the economies that contribute to greenhouse emissions must be held accountable. The president also encouraged countries to protect marine bodies along with its resources, especially since this is a common source of livelihood for many Filipinos. In addition, our stand is that Filipinos should be more knowledgeable and at the same time vigilant with the issues of climate change here in the Philippines, now more than ever. In 2013, the Philippines at one point ranked top 1 in countries mostly affected by climate change due to the geography of our country. In every occurrence of natural disasters due to climate change, it actually affects the country so much that it lessens the GDP of the country by 2%, another 2% to rebuild damaged infrastructures, and 4% to fund proactive measures. This is why we urge each and every citizen to do their part in lessening climate change and be a climate reality leader so that we may preserve our home, not just for this generation, but for the next ones to come. How does climate change affect our health, mental health, and economy? How does it affect our health? The Philippines, known to be a hotspot for diseases. A wide spread of diseases has been a breeding ground in our country due to climate change. According to John Ago, contributor for HuffPost, the spike is linked to the high population density of Metro Manila, which is ideal for transmitting diseases. This is most evident in poor communities where they suffer from poor hygiene and stagnant water occasionally brought by flooding. Given this, climate-related health issues become more critical in rural areas, which lack infrastructures and services common in urban areas, such as water distribution systems. For instance, the spread of cholera and typhoid fever can be worsened by poor water quality, lack of electricity access, and improper sanitation. For example, in Tacloban, the storm surge due to Typhoon Yolanda led to saltwater infiltration of groundwater resource, exposing its inhabitants to waterborne in the chaotic aftermath. Other than this, the storm destroyed most of the hospitals in the city, paralyzing healthcare services. Most of the city's inhabitants and refugees from nearby towns got cramped in evacuation centers, creating a favorable environment for the transmission of diseases. In a different article done by Elaine de la Vera Ruiz, a writer from Manila Bulletin, quoted an official statement from the World Health Organization that climate change is one of the main reasons for air pollution, which caused an approximate of 7 million premature deaths in the world. The country is known to have more meteorological conditions, which increases the number of citizens with a vector-borne disease, specifically dengue. How does climate change affect our mental health? The devastating effects climate change has on human physical health is all too familiar with the most of us. What is more often than not overlooked, however, is the psychological implications on human mental health. A person's understanding of what climate change could be easily rooted from their own personal experiences. This direct link is sometimes blurred once factors such as perception, helplessness, uncertainty, and political divide comes into play. The psychological nature of these factors are particularly important to consider, since they could greatly alter how people respond to the increasing threat brought by nature. Moreover, research by the American Psychological Association would suggest that the extreme weather changes brought about by climate change, as well as damaged water and food resources, may all weigh heavily on humans and may function as a source of stress and distress. Prolonged exposure to such may then lead to deterioration of one's mental health. It may even be a cause of compounded stress, anxiety, substance abuse, and depression. With all these considered, you may begin to ask yourself, is there any way I could prepare for this? Fortunately, as great of a threat it can pose on us, psychology has an answer to this, and that is resilience. By building our personal capacity to withstand great amounts of stress, we are able to mitigate the harmful effects of climate change may directly or indirectly cause on our mental health. Moreover, research would suggest that fostering good relationships with the people that surround us may prove to be a worthwhile investment in times of crisis, as we are naturally programmed to draw strengths from one another. All this would again point to the fact that although climate change could be seen more as a physical threat to human life, its grave implications mostly definitely do not stop there. How does climate change affect the economy? The impact of climate change may not be evident for those living in cities, but for numerous industries focused on agriculture, fisheries, and forestry, it has always transpired in their daily income. The overall economy of the Philippines is hindered by the prevalent low agricultural productivity and decline in marine catches due to failure in adaptation. Climate change creates an imbalanced modification of temperature, which causes the damage of crops and the inability to source out marine food capital. This impacts the import and export of goods in the local market. Due to this disruption, food security and price stability is less assured. The inflation of goods and services mostly obtained through natural excavation causes poverty to flourish further in the country. As this continues to progress, the marginalized society will soon barely afford to purchase basic necessities. On the other hand, this also provides an advantage for the business sectors of the Philippines, in turn heightening the country's economic growth as well. It is evident how a larger amount of income can be earned from this phenomenon, which would guarantee incessant and higher production of goods in the long run. How can we alleviate the effect of climate change? 1. Reducing carbon emissions through utilizing public transportation. According to the Federal Transit Administration, public transportation can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions by reducing the need to travel long distances and minimizing carbon footprint of transit. All of these data are collected by the U.S. Department of Energy and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. With how much people use their very own transportation, we can help alleviate greenhouse gases by using the public transportation so that our own private cars would not dispense chemicals that could hasten the effects of climate change. Lessening consumption. As stated by the story of stuff, we use too much. Too much of it is toxic and we don't share it very well. But that's not the way things should be. While we are busy consuming every material necessary we can afford to waste, the risk of climate change is growing. A simple day prevention of the adversities of climate change is through reducing consumption. By consuming less, we also waste less. Instead, we can focus on the joy we find in going to naturally beautiful places, spending time with your family and friends, or making your mark in the world. More concrete matters of reducing consumption would include acts such as composting, repairing, or even by merely sharing with others. Less is more, they say. This perfectly describes the small acts we can do to contribute to finding ways to mitigate the inevitable reoccurring problem across the globe. Encouraging efforts to recycle. Recycling has been the main practice adults kept teaching us before, and it's still very important till this very day because it helps alleviate greenhouse gas emissions. There are two benefits when it comes to recycling waste properly. It saves the energy in the processing of materials and reduces the flow of materials. Through these 2 points, greenhouse gases could further diminish even if it's as small as throwing your waste of garbage according to their proper category. Investigating in renewable energy. The Philippines is known to use more coal as main source of energy, and in the last month of May, 11,245 megawatts were used, and power analysis from Global Data Nagatham said, creating awareness among the public and businesses to embrace the technology and encouraging the adoption of solar and other renewable power technologies among institutional power consumers will go a long way in achieving the country's energy independence and security. Ronald Domingo, writer for Business Section Daily Inquirer, stated that investments for renewable energy would increase to the double digit over the next 12 years. London-based firms also claim that the investments are expected to increase 6.5% for the annual growth rate for renewable energy sources. Carbon pricing knowledge. Knowing which electronics or technologies that has a valued carbon price would help not only the economy but also the environment, as carbon pricing reduces the usage of carbon on technologies. This is a global project where different countries must cooperate in. Carbon pricing reveals how much carbon is used to make technological advancements and is a safer and cleaner way of mitigating gadgets that private sectors would create. If we know the pricing of the things we buy, we would be able not to only help the economic revenue, but also lessen the usage of carbon emissions.